Good day, everyone. I'm Andrea Mitchell in Washington, where President Trump is resisting bipartisan calls to end the crisis created by his own administration, where thousands of children are ripped from their parents at the border, what pediatricians have diagnosed as intentional child abuse. We're hearing the helpless cries of these kids for the first time through audio taken last week and released to a civil rights attorney from inside a detention facility. This audio has not been independently verified by NBC News, but just listen.
Bueno, aquí tenemos una orquesta.
It is a universal language of a cry for help. But Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen brushed off any concerns about the children's welfare during a contentious White House briefing late yesterday.
How is this not specifically child abuse for these innocent children who are indeed being separated from their parents?
10,000 of those currently in custody were sent by their parents with strangers to undertake a completely dangerous and deadly travel alone. We now care for them. We have high standards. We give them meals. We give them education. We give them medical care. There's videos. There's TVs. I visited the detention centers myself. That would be my answer to that question.
Joining me now, MSNBC's Jacob Soboroff in McAllen, Texas. MSNBC's Mariana Tenzio, just across the border in Reynosa, Mexico. MSNBC contributor Victoria DeFrancesco, a lecturer at the University of Texas's LBJ School of Public Affairs, who is in Brownsville, Texas today. And KPBS immigration reporter Jean Guerrero on the other end of the U.S.-Mexico border in San Diego. And NBC national security and justice reporter Julia Ainsley with our fact check in our Washington bureau. Well, first, Jacob, you, unlike Kirstjen Nielsen, are at the border and you have been inside these detention facilities more recently, a lot more recently. Your response to what she is saying about how the bureaucracy is handling this crisis?
Well, let me first say that we just heard the clip you played, Andrea, that Secretary Nielsen says she has been inside detention centers. Julia Ainsley, who I know is also on the air with us right now, and Jeff Bennett over at the White House have been able to confirm that she's never been inside this one, the epicenter of the family separation crisis here in McAllen, Texas, where over 1,100 kids have been separated from their parents. So I'm not sure how she's supposed to accurately talk about what's actually happening on the ground during this crisis without having walked through this facility just like we did on Sunday.
And you're not allowed to take cameras in, but we know from your descriptions, your extraordinary descriptions, what you saw inside, the cages, the mylar blankets on the floor, children crying, children separated from parents, and not having any way. I mean, tell me, when she talked about the ability of people to reconnect also at that briefing, tell me what happens when you try to dial an 800 number, if you even get a line, if you even have a phone, and the bureaucracy of what you have to go through.
Well, you don't know where your child is, and if you've been separated from your child and they've been placed into the custody of Health and Human Services, there's no guarantee you're going to be reunited immediately just because you happen to be the parent of that child. There's a process HHS has to go through once these children are in these facilities. They tell us 52 days is the minimum stay, but there's no guarantee that that reuniting is going to happen and that your child won't ultimately be placed with a sponsor that is other than yourself. I mean, it's just incorrect to say that it's an easy process. It's something that's simple to go through with because they hand you a piece of paper with an 800 number on it and a phone tree.
And one other point, I want to go to Mariana in Mexico, but one of the points you made in your many reports from down there is that you were assigned a number, Antonio? And it's an offensive category, but they call it an A number for alien, would you believe? And you're assigned that number, but that number does not coordinate between DHS and HHS. So you've got two agencies, and there's no coordination between them.
The onus is on the individual to figure out how to navigate this process. You know, ultimately, you know, they treat you like somebody who they believe has committed a criminal act. You've come into the country illegally, and once you walk out of this facility, you get that tear sheet, and you have got to figure it out on your own. It's not like they have a concierge. It's not like you're calling an airline or somewhere where they want to be there in order to make this necessarily an easy process. I would have a feeling that they would disagree with that characterization, but if it was easy, we wouldn't be hearing stories about people not being able to find their children.
And Mariana, on the Mexico side of the border, you're talking to mothers, to families who have chosen this route. It doesn't seem to be understandable at the White House briefings about why would parents go through this danger? Why would they break the law? Tell us what you're learning.
Andrea, they are choosing to wait out here to weigh this decision, this impossible decision that they tell me they are being put in a shelter like the one we are standing at right now. Senda de Vida, it is called. And first I want to sort of give you context as to where we are. This is Reynosa, Tamaulipas, on the Mexican side of the border, and it is one of the most dangerous cities in the country. We had to come in here with a security detail. You see guards behind me now. We were told by the pastor that runs this shelter that we couldn't even peek outside. So once these mothers make that dangerous trek from Central America here, it is in this very dangerous city where a turf war is being fought between two cartels, the Zetas and the Gulf cartels, where they're having to weigh this decision as to what to do given this new policy. And I want to talk to a mother, Maria, and her son Antonio, because as you were talking about family separations and what these kids are going through, we've been reporting on a new trend, which is mothers who are not prosecuted after crossing the border illegally because zero tolerance is not at 100% capacity, who are still being separated from their kids younger than 18. That is something, Andrea, that did not happen during the Obama administration. And this is at least the fourth case that I have found of separation by agents at the border. Maria, I want to get your take. Your son is 14. And he has epilepsy. He has seizures. You're holding his medicine in his hand. Tu hijo está enfermo. You were separated inside that facility. Were you given a reason why? ¿Te explicaron por qué te separaban de él?
No, no me explicaron.
I wasn't told why. They just separated us. And you have been deported back to Mexico because the policy for Mexicans is different, unlike Central Americans. A ti te deportaron para acá.
Sí.
Pero todavía quieres llegar a Estados Unidos? You still want to cross?
Sí.
Even though there's a chance he could be separated from you, aunque hay una posibilidad que te lo pueden separar.
Sí.
You still want to cross. Why? ¿Por qué?
Quiero cruzar con él para
I want
que
to cross because
tenga mejor tratamiento.
I need him to get treatment. He has epilepsy.
Un daño cerebral.
He has something in his brain, and that's why I need to cross. Antonio, if you can share some of what happened to you. Te separaron de tu mamá ahí adentro. You were separated from your mom in there. You're 14 years old.
Quiero que me ayude,
I need help.
que salga mi papá.
That I want my father to be released. Their father was kept there by immigration officials. Can you tell me what conditions you were held in? We're trying to understand what other kids are going through. Estamos tratando de entender qué está pasando con los niños ahí adentro. Can you tell us where you were sleeping? ¿Dónde dormías?
Con unos niños, dormía
With other kids?
Sí.
Where? On a bed, on the floor, en una cama, en el suelo?
en el suelo.
On the floor.
Sí, dormía.
Did you have to wrap yourself in blankets? ¿Con qué te cubrías del frío? How did you cover yourself at night?
Con la- no dormíamos bien.
We didn't sleep very well. Were you told when you were going to see your mother again, when you were going to get your medicine? ¿Te dijeron cuándo ibas a ver a tu mamá? No. Were you given your medicine? ¿Te dieron tu medicina?
Sí,
You were given your medicine. Okay. The kid was given his medicine inside, Antonio? ¿Le dieron su medicina adentro?
Esta no, lo tiraron a la basura.
Okay, she says not this one specifically, that they tossed this one to the floor.
Llegando aquí lo compramos.
I bought this when I got here. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, because even though you were separated for a short time, ¿cuántos días? 5 días separados? They were separated for 5 days, Andrea, but it gives us again a window into what other families are going through, and especially not getting any explanation as to when they're going to see their parents again or why they are there is one of the most heartbreaking things for many of the folks that I have been talking to throughout the past couple of days on this immigration crisis. Andrea?
Oh, Mariana, thank you so much. And you're trying to be as specific as possible, but I think we'd all agree, Victoria, that 5 days is not a short time for a mother and a child to be separated, a child who needs his medicine, and not knowing the stress of not knowing when they will be reunited. Victoria?
Absolutely. It is a lifetime for a mother to be separated out from her child. And aside from that separation, there is the logistical madness of what is going on the bureaucratic side, because what the Trump administration has done is implemented this large-scale zero-tolerance policy without any organizational component to it. They implemented it a couple weeks ago, but there was no forethought into well, if we're going to do this, how are we going to do it? How are we going to do it right? So instead, what we're seeing is complete chaos, separation of families, where the kids are essentially lost from their parents because of the differentiation between the numbers in HHS and Office of Refugee Resettlement. And then remember, there's also the federal prison component that comes into play. Add on top of all of that is the judicial component. So there's an extremely long backlog of being able to hear immigration cases. So adding on to that, prolonging this pain, prolonging the separation, because this terrible policy was so poorly thought out to begin with.
And Julia Ainsley, you've been talking to all of these DHS officials. A lot of us watched Kirstjen Nielsen yesterday attempting to try to answer these questions, but basically brushing off a lot of these questions about the bureaucracy. She would say, well, that's DHS. That's not that's rather HHS, not DHS. How does anyone work through this red tape?
Right. I mean, I think that those acronyms, that alphabet soup, it means nothing to people who have been separated from their children. And as I just reported, Andrea, we now understand that there could be some situations where parents are permanently separated from their children. This is coming from officials that I spoke to in the Obama administration who said that in some cases where they had to separate, usually because of more serious charges than what we're seeing now, it is possible that a parent runs through this process much more quickly than the child is deported, and then the child stays on the United States side, and it's very hard for them to navigate that system. So what they want is answers, and they want, and I think not even immigrants, but American people want answers as to who is really responsible for this, and we're getting a lot of mixed messages. Another thing I wanted to fact check Secretary Nielsen on is what she said about how people could just turn themselves in at ports of entry. As
well,
Mariana
let me just, Julia, play that for you and then get you to react on the other side.
Yes.
As I said before, if you're seeking asylum, go to a port of entry. You do not need to break the law of the United States to seek asylum.
People are being turned away from ports of entry, Madam Secretary.
That actually is incorrect. We have limited resources. We have multiple missions at CBP. And what we do is, based on the very high standards we have, if we do not have enough bed space, if we do not have enough medical personnel on staff, if we do not have enough caretakers on staff, then we will tell people that come to the border they need to come back.
Julia,
Andrea,
what's your fact check on that?
Well, I've done reporting on this. I did this when the migrant caravan arrived. This lack of resources is intentional. I can tell you that. I've spoken to officials. I've seen the numbers. I've seen the documents. They don't want to rush those resources that she's describing to the border because they want to make it hard for people to come in. They knew that migrant caravan was coming for over a month, and they did nothing to prepare for it because they want a backlog. They want people to be turned away. And in this case, they are practically forcing them to go in illegally where they could then charge them and separate them.
And Jean Guerrero, let's follow up on that, because there are people who come in and get to ports of entry, and from your own reporting, are still separated from their children, even though they are taking the legal front door approach.
Exactly. Exactly. Here at the San Ysidro Port of Entry, which is the busiest port of entry in the United States, I get to see a lot of things that we don't see along other parts of the And one of the things I've seen is that when asylum seekers present themselves, even at the port of entry, there are cases where they have been separated from their children. I've talked to multiple parents that this has happened to. They presented themselves at the port of entry the legal way. They asked for asylum. They said that they feared for their lives. And there was one father in particular who had a 1-year-old baby that was sent 1,500 miles away to a shelter in Texas, and he remains in detention in Otay Mesa currently.
Jean, when you talk to officials there about what they're doing at this port of entry, how do they excuse themselves? How do they explain it?
Right. So the policy within Immigration and Customs Enforcement is if an asylum seeker presents themselves at the port of entry, they say that they will not separate families so long as they have proper documentation. And that the cases in which they do separate families, it has to do with the safety of the children, that they haven't provided enough evidence that this is actually their child. But the cases that I followed, in particular the father that I mentioned, he says that he brought the original birth certificate of the child as well as his Salvadoran ID, presented those documents to Customs and Border Protection at the port of entry, and then was transferred to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, where he no longer had those documents, and they told him he didn't have enough evidence that this was his baby. I followed up with Customs and Border Protection repeatedly to try to find out if they had ever in fact received these documents from the father. They neither confirmed nor denied, and I just kept getting sent back between agencies. So I think what this reporting shows is that there are instances in which even when asylum seekers go the legal route and present themselves at the ports of entry, the Trump administration is sometimes separating families, and Secretary Nielsen said yesterday that they're not doing this, that if people cross legally, they will not be separated, but that's simply not the case. My reporting has shown that there are instances where they're being separated even when they cross legally.
A classic catch-22. Thank you so much, Jean and Victoria and Mariana and Jacob and Julia as well. And coming up, Homeland Insecurity.